Savage.
Savage kind of lets everything out. You hear the inner man, how he really feels.
The Savage Nation. Talk 910 KNEW.
All right, well, look, you know, we're getting very interesting callers today because when we go off the political and get into the spiritual, the psychological, the life questions, I think it becomes an interesting show. And, of course, they all lead back to politics one way or the other. I think that the people who are most tormented in searching to find their path in their life, who have spent years trying to find themselves, so to speak, moving around in religions, moving around in philosophies, many of these people are listeners to this show, and for many different reasons, I know this to be true. And most of you who might call on this issue today would never call about politics for reasons that we'll talk about another day. Let's go to Palm Beach, where Barbara is calling. I think it's a fascinating call. Barbara, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. Since I was 3 and 5 years old, looking up at the stars, I recall there were two things I was madly in love with: the stars and truth. And I was born and raised in a Roman Catholic family, not a devout family, devout practicing Catholic family. But then on my own, I'm 12 and 14 years old. I'm searching for the truth, and I'm studying on my own all these philosophies, Spinoza, Aristotle, everything. And I kept searching, and through the religions and all these different religions. And what the point I'm trying to make is that eventually through my life and my life experiences, I end up back where I began, which is the Roman Catholic Church. And then I understood it. You see, you have to understand, Michael, many, or if not most Catholics out there don't truly understand the Catholicism, the truth of the theology of the Catholic faith. Past few years when I was taking the Catholic Bible classes, I learned that my Catholic Church says this, that yes, Jews and Protestants and Hindus and Buddhas and even possibly some atheists will certainly go to heaven. That God judges the heart. He's going to judge us by the golden rule, how much we love. And this is very important to understand that concept. That's
well, it's a very accepting, tolerant view of the world. That's what I was trying to get at. And I think that if we haven't learned post 9/11 to be tolerant of others, it's going to lead to further disaster for all of us. Now, when I say tolerant, I don't mean let someone step on you or convert you to their religion against your will. That's a little different than accepting that their path may be right for them and wrong for you. That's a little different. But it's interesting you said you were always a truth seeker, and then you went back to your original religion, the religion of your childhood or of your birth, the religion of your parents, as it were, and you started to see the beauty, the deeper beauty, the deeper meaning of your religion, which is Roman Catholicism. Isn't that what you said?
Well, yes, but because of but I also wanted to comment, without looking for anything or expecting anything, once I returned to my faith and I started again resuming the practices of the Catholic practices of confession and Holy Communion, the sacraments, I had, without drugs, I was never into drugs, legal or illegal, and I've had some spiritual experiences happen to me without. You should have a show on that. Boy, will you get the calls.
A show on what? A show on what, Barbara?
I'm sorry?
A show on what?
About people who've had religious experiences. Some like I didn't look.
I see what you mean. Okay, I appreciate what you just said. Thank you. Now that triggers another thought on my mind. Over the weekend, I watched the movie The Deer Slayer with Robert De Niro. Now, I got to go into this for a reason. It's directly related to politics and religion. I had seen it a few times in pieces. It was very long, like 3 hours long. The opening hour of that movie, the opening 90 minutes of that movie, is astounding. First, there's a wedding in a town outside Pittsburgh in the steel mills. These are blue-collar guys, steel workers. And the Roman Catholic Church that is portrayed in that film is one of the most beautiful portrayals of religion as practiced by common people I've ever seen in my life. It was astoundingly beautiful. And you look at it and you wonder what happened to America, how these men all grew up in the same community, all went to the same church, all were married in the same church, all buried their parents in that same church. And the continuity then leads them to Vietnam. They're drafted and they go into the army together, and they fight together. And the portrayal of how the American men were brutalized by the NVA. Now, whether this was an isolated incident or it occurred more frequently, I do not know. But the absolute brutality of the torture inflicted on the American men by the Vietnamese communists was so beyond anyone's conception of chillingly frightening that it's hard to portray unless you've seen the movie. You should see it again. But the chill of that movie was how the communists swept through South Vietnam, not only how they killed the American men. I know many of you are brainwashed into thinking that the American men were the brutals. Oh, well, your brains were washed by Joan Baez and the left-wing vermin of this country, from Walter Cronkite to every stinker in the media who told you that we were the bad ones. Take a look at what happened after we left Vietnam, when those communist evil men killed over 1 million South Vietnamese, re-education camps, torture camps, death camps. That didn't make it to the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. That didn't make it to the folk songs of Joan Baez. That didn't make it into your mind. No, all you had was the American men, the heroes who went over there and fought and died and came back, some of them ruined for life, some of them improved for life. You didn't know any of that. All you knew was that they were struggling for their independence and Ho Chi Minh was a hero. But the point I'm making is, starts with that church, the religion, the guys go to Vietnam and how they're tortured and how they escape that and what it does for them, how it affects them for the rest of their lives. And you look at that and you say to yourself, you got to fight against communism with everything in you. You know, when I saw the scene of the people fleeing Saigon at the end of that movie, as the communists sweep into power and sweep through the south of Vietnam, when I saw the people with their packages of the goods that they could grab out of their houses and they're running away, I said, it can't happen here. It can't happen here. It is happening here. You say, oh, come on, you're crazy, you're an extremist. Things don't happen overnight. They happen by degree. Revolutions don't happen overnight. They happen by degree. Obama is a revolutionary communist by every one of his acts. Bill Ayers is Barack Obama. We told you this before the election. Make no mistake about it. He's just a smooth con man. And he conned you white liberals in particular into thinking he was for you and you for him. I am telling you as I stand here that every instinct in me, whatever I may have in the instinctual department, that I have been right 100 times on the show over 15 years. Every instinct in me tells me that we are watching a slow-growing communist revolution in this country. And it can still be altered, it can still be stopped. But if you don't recognize who this man is and how his closest associates are exactly in that image, then you know nothing about history, you know nothing about the current times, and you cannot see a thing as to what is coming in the future. So I told you that religion would eventually lead back to politics, and politics would lead us back to religion. So on that note, let me summarize what I just said. Go and watch I think it's called The Deer Slayer. The Deer Hunter, I'm sorry, with Robert De Niro. And watch particularly the scenes in the church. Because who directed that movie? I don't remember who directed that film. But, you know, those days are over of film direction. Guys, look it up while we're talking. The genius of the director here was that he used common people from that area and from that church in the film, mixed in with the actors. So that when you see a wedding scene, you're seeing the old geezers sitting at the bar from the town. When you see a church scene, you're seeing the regular people from the church mixed in with the, I believe these people ethnically were either Polish Americans or Russian Americans or a mixture of both, and who were largely the steel workers at that time in that area. And how they go over to Vietnam. And, of course, it was their hunting skills, their ability to use guns, and their ability to hunt that permitted them to survive in Vietnam. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? The same thing was true. The same thing was true, by the way, in World War II, if you studied the history of our fighter pilots. Many of them came from farms they'd never flown before. But they grew up with a .22 caliber rifle, hunting small game. And I remember reading some of these pilots who flew the P-51s, the Mustangs. They said that when they went to flight school and then they went into aerial combat, it was the same as hunting a rodent or a deer. They learned that they had when they're fighting the enemy fighter, they had to lead the plane. They had to fire their bullets ahead of the plane that was flying across their field of vision, just as an animal running. Now, how are you going to teach that to a kid who never fired a gun in his life? How are you going to teach that to a kid who grew up complaining about everything, taught to complain, that he feels like he has an inner woman in him, and he has to get down and cry when someone asks him to do something hard? He complains, he cries, he sues, he goes back to mommy. How in the world can a country survive with a nation of imbeciles like this that we've raised for the last 20 years? How in the world can we ever survive? How can this country ever defend itself? And when you add that picture up of the weakling generation that we have raised, the drug addicts, the Ritalin addicts, the potheads, the